good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Angie Mendez, and I came from Norway to share with you here today some of our experiences in Scandinavia. I work for a company called A-Lab. It's an architectural studio based in Norway. We are like 100 architects, and we belong to a larger ecosystem of engineers called Multiconsult, where we are about 4,000 people. So I am very impressed with all the efforts that you're doing here in Hungary, and I think that it's important that we all put technology into context. When we think what technology means for humanity, I encourage you to think about it this way. 98% of all the data that we have created in the whole history of humanity has been accumulated in the last couple of years. So we are in the middle of it. It's happening as we speak. And it is very important that we give this a meaning. There is a tendency to feel that AI and technology will have a similar effect like the Industrial Revolution, where everything is cheaper, faster, and better. But I personally don't think that AI is going to spit out a better world on the other end. So we have to put things into context, and allow me to ask you this question. It's a very philosophical question that has been going around. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And in the world where we're creating a lot of data lakes in different places of the world, is this technology and this data having value regardless of its use? I personally think that the answer is no. And in the context of the construction industry, data has a huge potential to protect those late night ideas that are so precious to us, to collaborate better, and nevertheless to understand the impact of your design decisions. So why are we still treating data, if that is the new material of architecture, as if it was scaffolding instead of a structural element that you can take with you for the entire of the project? And I think that is particularly a matter of timing. Let me give you an example on how at A-Lab we have come together with the developers to set up some goals for the use of data in real projects. So this is Liliakirbyen. It's 500,000 square meter urban development. It's basically a new district. And the client has the theory that if we increase the city life in the bottom layer of the city, that automatically is going to create a destination that increases the price of anything that happens on top of that place where everybody wants to be. So how can we help them using data make better decisions that play to their ambition and their goals? We did a very specific program for them. And it's almost something that we call retail acupuncture. You can make small changes and create new synergies in the city level. And we worked together with their realtors that had the rule of thumb that you have to always put entrances in the corners because they are the most accessible visually. So we use pedestrian simulation, which allows you to see how human mobility would work with a program in a specific 3D context. And then we immediately understood that it was actually not the corners that were the hot spots in the facades. And we did optimize the access and the program to fit that. The problem is that, of course, this came very late in the process, so we had to redraw a lot of the solutions. But it taught us that it is very important to coordinate with the clients and make the technology outcome-based. So how can you build a case for data-driven workflows, especially in an skeptical environment? I can assume that if you are here, it's because you are among the curious ones, people that wants to be a bit on the front of what's happening with technology. And that means that you're probably encountering a lot of resistance. So what we have done is to try to focus on the arguments that can help you further that agenda. And that is, first of all, digital requirements. We are trying to educate our architects and engineers to challenge the requirements and ask the clients what they are actually going to use the information for. And in this context, it is very important that we always have a goal and that the information comes at the right time. It's not a matter of saying no, but it's more about placing things in the correct place in the project plan. One thing that we have discovered is that BIM, 20 years ago, when we started using this technology in Scandinavia, it was meant to be for construction purposes. As this digital asset continued to increase in value for the building owners, we started feeding it with a lot of scattered data from around the ecosystem. But what we see is that a lot of the project data is actually not in BIM format or even compatible with BIM software. So what we're trying to do is to look at BIM as one more source of information in a rather complex ecosystem of data and tools. Another argument that we see fit is to have the right data at the right time. And this is the best advice that I can give you. You can activate your client by providing them access in real time to the models. And for this, it's also required that you will have in place some quality assurance systems that create trust in your deliveries and that you can give them data consistently. And one thing that we notice, precisely because the BIM data is not necessarily compatible with project data, one of the aspects that we're focusing in is input the contracts in the construction within the design models. And that way, this is information that is not relevant for the people working in BIM, but it is for the project leaders and the decision makers. So we're using alternative tools to BIM software to look at BIM as a database that you can manage instead of just as a 3D modeling tool. Next, you have rules over manual work. We need to focus on automation. And what I personally do is to ask my colleagues, which jobs do they love and hate from their day? And then you focus on automating the jobs that they don't like. Because why would you take away from designers the tasks that they love to do? It doesn't matter that they are repetitive. It is part of the thinking and the design exploration. But there is a lot of, as I call them, monkey jobs that should absolutely be automated because that's what the computer power is for. And in a world where everything is changing because the design is extremely dynamic, we cannot have manual routines overriding daily work. So it's important that we support the design teams with relentless automation. And now, how could you build that from this culture of working database in a project to turn it into a business model, something that can scale up to your organization? What we see that are the most effective strategies that we have used is the first one, return of investment. And when I say this, I don't mean return in terms of money, but there is many ways that you can demonstrate that you're creating added value in the project. But for that, whatever proposal you make has to be measurable. That's what I mean with return on investment. And I use this both internally in the company to convince people of doing new things, and when we propose something to the client, do it in a way that they can actually evaluate what kind of value is creating and where in their ecosystem. Tools versus processes is also important because technology is a moving target. These companies, startups come and go, and the tech is mature enough, I promise you, but where we are lacking is in putting in place some robust processes that actually can last from beginning to end of the project, especially for reviews. Also, technology could be an argument for risk assessment. What I hear from our clients is that designers work for too long on the wrong premises. So creating future scenarios through particularly simulation can give us a good indicator on how far or close we are from the success criteria of the project. And last but not least, how collaboration can encourage not only efficiency but also creativity. Well, return on investment, as I said, is a matter of making things measurable. I am a little bit obsessed personally with digital twins. And I see that there is a huge potential on reusing the buildings that we already have today instead of building new. But when we approach a client that could be interested on measuring the functionality of the building today, it cannot be something cool that you will get the return of investment in down the line in 20 years. It has to be tangible. So the way how we have presented, for example, if it's going to be innovation, is that if you start evaluating a building in use, the occupancy metrics don't lie to which degree you are utilizing every space. And here you can see the results. We had one particular room that was underperforming at 18%. Typically, in an office building, you will have an occupancy up to 60%. So that was particularly low. And the idea is to convince the client that they're underutilizing a resource and optimize it. So what we did to understand what that particular room was underperforming so much compared to the others was to add some climate data. And we understood very quickly that that room in particular was hotter than what the performance for productivity was suggested. The air quality was bad, the temperature was not ideal, so people just didn't use it. And the conclusion for the client was just to remove the room. And suddenly they gained, 5 to 7 square meters of area that they didn't have before. And you can easily put a money price on that. Tools versus people, you have to focus on who is actually using this. Standardization is the way how we go from experience-based knowledge to things that are scalable in a company, knowledge that is exponentially shared. However, standardization needs to be looked in the frame of the project needs. Everything has to be outcome-based. So we start with that layer and then build on top what is the unique need of the project on every step. So for me, it's important not to give standardization more importance than it has. It's more about creating a common language in the industry, about how we create this flow of information that everybody understands. Risk assessment. As I said, simulation help us create these future scenarios that could give you insights into the effects of the design, not only now, but for several generations to come. So this is an example of a project that we did in Oslo. It's for Oslo, we don't like heights, so this was a little bit bold move, mini Manhattan in the middle of the city. And of course, because we're up north, we were very concerned with the microclimate consequences of suddenly putting skyscrapers in the middle of the city. So in order to convince, in this case, the authorities, we sat down together with the municipality and with the designer of the other projects to make sure that we understood the full consequences of daylight, noise, and comfort that we were creating in the city. And we did this very early on a volume level experiment. So we had the opportunity not only to solve the architecture once it was decided, but to actually find the uniqueness, that X factor on that site, and the collaboration among all the architects of the area to show to the city of Oslo that we were actually improving the existing conditions, not making them worse. And, collaborative models are all about open data, bringing people into the discussion, using objective information to make the conversation smarter and allow for them to be part of the co-creation of the project. So this is an example of the Fornebubanen, which is a couple of stations in a new subway line in Oslo. And we were discussing with the engineers the size and the section of the tunnel. And believe me, this tunnel goes under a lot of very expensive properties in Norway, and each centimeter counts. So for design reasons, as you can see in the bottom, our intention was to recreate the weather outside. And for that, we needed to have certain shapes. But we discovered very early that every single centimeter we will add into the tunnel, we will have huge consequences for 100 plus other disciplines that were involved in this. So instead of just asking for something that didn't mean anything for them, we're trying to involve them in the why and the how it will look like in the end. And suddenly this kind of discussion brings the best out of everybody that is involved, regardless of what's your background. So it goes to show you that the future is truly going to be interdisciplinary. And nevertheless, introducing technology with meaning and with a map, with a roadmap, with a plan, will bring the gap between the generations much closer. My experience working with startups and with universities around Europe is that for the new generation, it is a given that we live in a digital world. So we need to pay attention to them and start giving them place. And nevertheless, the amazing Ursulia, who invited me to this conference, had actually deployed a paper about how a framework could help you to define your own strategy for your own organization. So I absolutely recommend you to follow up on this. And in the end of the day, the whole goal is to design for impact. What is important for you? I think we're in agreement that the basis of our existence is nature. And then the layer of architecture and urbanism is our answer to what is missing from nature for us to thrive. And now we are experiencing this whole virtual world around us that hopefully is not only going to support your ideas, but also going to inspire new ones, because this virtual world has no limit. It's going to allow us, as we say in tech, to fail fast, to test quickly, turn every stone, and then allow for a much larger ecosystem of innovators to be part of it. So I feel that a lot of the pieces of the puzzle are in place. I can tell you that technology is mature enough. We need to focus on the processes and the people, and it's basically just one little step. So I see that you're also getting close to figuring it out, and this is why we need to stay in touch and put together the effort that we're doing in the different countries in Europe. So that's what I had for today. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.